representing their own country and culture while they're doing their studies in the US. And so it's the kind of people-to-people diplomacy that we are talking about, and an ambassadorial program. And this is why we also interview our candidates. We want to see them in person and talk to them, see a little bit what kind of persons they are. Another unique feature is that we are always looking for people who have interest or motivation to act as change makers, or have the kind of desire to, or motivation to make change in the future or some point in their career, and who are interested in the Fulbright Finland Foundation's mission, which is together shaping the future. And a third distinction is that our programs provide a lot of different support services to the grantees. So there is not only the monetary aspect, but a lot of support provided for the grantees. Then I'll talk about our undergraduate grant program. So today we are focusing on the undergraduate studies in the US. We also have grant programs for graduate studies. But today we talk about these undergraduate programs. This undergraduate program is available for US if you are doing exchange studies, if you are already in Finland in a university and you would do a 1 semester or 1 academic year exchange studies in the US, or if you are interested in doing a full bachelor's degree in the US. So then you can apply to this program. And here it's important that you would have a good funding plan when you apply to this Fulbright Finland undergraduate program. So funding from a US institution, for instance, for the tuition or living expenses, because the funding here that the Fulbright Finland Foundation provides is a small addition to the existing funding package. And in addition, we also naturally provide these kind of support services that I'm soon talking more about. And then I could mention a little bit about the ambassadorial role of the grantees in this undergraduate grant program. What it can mean in practice is that they can, for example, go to talk in a US university about Finland or study opportunities in Finland, or the Fulbright Finland Foundation opportunities for Americans in Finland. So this is one way they can act as ambassadors, the grantees. And when they come back, or grantee comes back to Finland, they have an opportunity to participate and share their experience in the US. For instance, like today, we have Patrick Haverinen, our undergraduate grantees, telling to you about how his experience have been. So these are some examples of the ambassadorial role, and also we always provide support and materials for the grantees if they go and talk, for instance, in their home institution. If they have an international study day, for instance, they could go and talk about Finland there. And then a little bit more about the undergraduate program still, and particularly about the benefits that we provide. There's the extensive orientation training. So we are talking about a comprehensive program. Extensive orientation training. For instance, we talk about their US culture, US higher education system, what you need to know about Social Security when you move to the US, how about looking for housing, how is the US study culture. We talk about these type of topics in the orientation, and also give some tips for acting as an ambassador. You get personal advising services. You have a personal contact person here at the foundation that supports you on your way. For instance, if you have questions related to applying the visa and on that phase, so you have support from here. And then also networking opportunities is something that we provide. So you are included in this Fulbright Finland Foundation community, which includes US and Finnish grantees, scholars, students, Finnish people going to the US. So you get to meet them who are at the same time planning their trip to the US or their stay in the US, and you get to connect with them, and then also after your grant term, you have opportunity to be an alum and participate in the alumni activities. For instance, recently we provided company visits for our alumni here in Finland. And then also the alumni are important support for the grantees. When you go to the US, they are all the American grantees who've been to Finland. They are volunteering to act as a support network for the new Finnish who are going to the US. And then there's also the partial funding that comes typically ranging from 1,000 to 3,000. And then Vanderbilt University Partnership Award that the Fulbright Finland Foundation has. This is a great opportunity to study in the US at Vanderbilt University and complete a full bachelor's degree. This is such a program where you have a two-part application process. So you first apply to Vanderbilt University to the bachelor's program, and then you apply also the grant from Vanderbilt. And after that, if you are accepted, there's a separate phase when you contact the Fulbright Finland Foundation and can apply for the benefits that come through the Fulbright Finland Foundation. And the benefit package in this partnership award include from the Vanderbilt University the full tuition scholarship, as well as then there are possibilities for receiving help covering room and board and other fees if the student's financial need exceeds the tuition scholarship. And then from the Fulbright Finland side, you receive the other support services or the support services that I just mentioned that are included in our undergraduate grant program. So these orientation services, they are, by the way, in the form of online meetings and then in-person meeting here in Helsinki, including award ceremony at the Helsinki City Hall. And then there's also online material available for you and these personal advising and support services, for instance, in the visa process, as well as the alumni network available in the US and alumni activities in Finland after the grant term. Then finally, I want to share with you this one quote from our alum who wanted to comment the valuable support that she has received from the foundation and the meaning of the network for her. I will then also shortly tell you a little bit about the US higher education comparing to the Finnish higher education. There's the higher education in the US is world class. There are over 4,000 colleges and universities to choose from, expert faculty, top researchers that you can connect with while studying. And also one characteristic that I could mention is that you don't need to be certain what you want to major in when you apply to the bachelor's program. Like in Finland, you need to, because you can first do these general studies and then later on decide what would be your major. And the student population is quite diverse there in US universities. Typically, people come there from different parts of the world, so you get to work and study with very diverse group of people learning from different ways of thinking. And also the experience in the US is more holistic maybe compared to the Finnish university system, because the campus culture is very unique and vibrant there. And there are a lot of extracurricular activities. You might be living on the campus in dormitories, particularly as undergraduate students usually do on their first year of studies at least. And then I could still mention the support services that US universities provide for international students. They are really good as well. And then I could go to the next slide. here in a nutshell, you can see what are the 5 steps for studying in the US. What are the steps you need to take? The number 1 is research. So research. What are the universities you are interested in? As you heard, there are some thousands of universities, so you need to do a lot of research to find the good match for you and which offers the kind of programs you are interested in and suit your academic and professional goals. There are some search engines, for instance, that you can use in this task. And you can think about, do you want to study in a smaller classroom or bigger classroom, live in a metropolitan, like a huge city, or like in a smaller town, what's suitable for you? And then alongside with this, doing research on the universities and choosing the university options, you also need to think about your finances and make a financial plan. What is a financially realistic option? So that is important to keep in mind and find out if the universities provide funding, if you need funding and what type of funding is available. And once you have listed your university options and considered the funding questions, you can move to the application phase and look into the application documents, what you need to attach there. There are several documents. And in this page, you can also contact the Fulbright Finland outreach ambassadors who help Finnish students who are applying to the US. They are those students who have studied or are currently studying in the US themselves. So they help also the new students, and you can ask their information from us or look them on our website. Their email addresses are there as well. I'm about to finish soon. Sorry, I'm a bit running out of time. And then in the end, when you have the university where you go, you apply the visa to the US, you go to the interview here at the US Embassy in Helsinki, and then after that, you start at least then prepare your departure, flights, housing, insurance, and etc. Here's still a list of tips for funding your studies. There are merit-based scholarships that you can get from US institutions, sports scholarships, need-based aid. So it's important to find out directly from the US university that you are interested in, what type of funding they provide. You can contact their admission office or financial office to ask about these. And if we talk about these need-blind admissions, which means that in the admission process, your funding capabilities is not taken into account. Here is a list of universities that are this type of need-blind admission institutions, but also meet students' full demonstrated financial need. There are few of these institutions.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Do we get those slides?
Yeah, we'll send these to you.
Yes.
Yes. And then also there are these need-aware admission institutions where your financial capabilities are taken into account in the admission process. And these institutions can also provide you funding, which can be even substantial sometimes. And then you have, of course, from Finland, the student aid, student loan that you can have for studies in the US. And then you can think about other foundations, organizations that provide funding, or have your own savings or support from parents. These are some of the resources. I'm now finishing here and would like to welcome our alumna, Patrik Haverinen, to share his comments from Yale University. Thank you, Patrik, for waking up early and taking the time to talk to us. My colleague Sara is just about now. There we see your picture. Welcome so much, Patrik. Great to have you here. Please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, it is 9 a.m. here, so my apologies if I'm a little incoherent, but it's always very nice to come to all these Fulbright events. Fulbright Finland has been a great source of not only community but also support throughout my entire college journey and right before I was studying here as well. So it's always very nice to meet with you all, and especially the prospective students and student counselors as well. Yeah, so my name is Patrick again. I'm studying at Yale University, New Haven, Connecticut, in the United States. I'm from Helsinki. I'm studying global affairs. On the side, I also do French and journalism. We have all these different certificate programs, but you can only major in one thing. So my major is global affairs here at Yale. I'm a third year student, so that means that I have one more year left. I've really enjoyed my studies here. It's an entirely different kind of environment than what I'm used to at home, but also what I hear a lot of my peers sort of in Finland doing. It's a very social environment, so you live on campus all 4 years. At least most people do. I'm still here in my dorm room, only moving from one room to another, but within the same college. So you get a lot of community within those 4 years, and that's been a really great experience. As for my funding, I'm on full financial aid. As was mentioned before, Yale gives very generous financial aid to international students. So that means that not only is my tuition covered, but I also get assistance with flights. I get 3 meals per day. I get to live here for free, and then all sorts of additional assistance as well. So, for example, last summer, I did a summer program in the southern part of France, where Yale actually covered my entire stay there for a month just to study English literature for no apparent reason whatsoever. But it was just absolutely wonderful. And then the same thing for this summer. I'm getting just the best kinds of resources. Whatever you want to do, you can apply for those resources, for that funding. But yeah, I'm in a very privileged position because Yale does have a lot of resources and it can give out a bunch of those stipends. And it also sort of, when you're applying to Yale, you only need to sort of give out your financial information once. So that means that I don't have to reapply ever again. I don't need to sort of they don't need to reevaluate my financial standing at all, which is great. It gives you a sense of stability, and it also means that you know how to plan financially for these 4 years. And then on top of that, you obviously get the sort of financial assistance from back home, the student benefits, and even the student loans if you have to take them. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get a lot of help. And then if you don't go to, or if you're not accepted to a college that does have some kind of need-based system, need-blind system like that, there are still a lot of other avenues available. And if any of you want to reach out, I'm more than happy to talk about that. I have a lot of friends in other universities who have such systems, but who have managed to figure it out very nicely. But I'm very lucky to be here and not sort of have to worry about that anymore. In sort of general terms, I would say that studying in the US, especially coming from Finland, coming from Helsinki, coming from a very sort of basic Finnish educational background, so to say, with no prior connection to the US, it was definitely quite the culture shock, especially the first couple of months coming here, seeing how social people are, how much you sort of need to be on all the time. You're going to these seminars and you need to be able to sort of give your spiel, just within seconds, and be able to sort of discuss any topic, any given topic, with very little prior sort of prior preparation or whatsoever. I was also kind of anxious about sort of my English level. I wasn't really sort of just because I hadn't spent time in the US before, I wasn't sure how I was gonna fare. But all of those things eventually do fall into place. It just takes a little bit of time, and I'm more than grateful to be here. So yeah, like I said, it's a very social environment, but there's also just so much going on all the time. There's a lot of events. We just had one of my biggest idols, Faris Zakaria, the CNN journalist, come here. We're gonna have Christine Lagarde in a few days. Just a bunch of really interesting people coming from outside of campus to share their stories and actually really engage with students, which is really great. And just the course offerings are absolutely wonderful as well. So how it works is that before every single semester, you can choose between 4 and 5 classes. Usually it's between that. It could be a little less, a little more, and it can be, it can vary from, ethics to artificial intelligence to whatever. So the liberal arts system is really great in that it provides you the opportunity to explore things outside of your comfort zone. So only one third of your entire curriculum throughout your 4 years is actually your major. So only a third of my studies are related to global affairs, and then the next third you have to sort of complete some of these sort of skills-based requirements. So I'm doing a couple of writing classes, I'm doing some sort of social science classes, some QR classes, which basically means that you have to do some sort of quantitative reasoning. And then the last third is absolutely whatever you want. So that really gives you leeway to sort of explore, and that's been absolutely wonderful. I've taken, classes ranging from sort of Ukrainian history to ethics to artificial intelligence, like I mentioned before, and doing a lot of history, doing a lot of philosophy, but also doing a lot more sort of applicable studies, whether it's language or writing or coding or whatever on that front. So yeah, I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have, but I've just enjoyed being here very much, and I hope, if you're embarking on this journey, or if you're a guidance counselor who's sort of helping other people go through this process, then feel more than free to reach out. I'm sure the foundation will be happy to share my contact information.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Patrick. Are you able to stay online until we have the Q&A? Oh, wonderful. So
Yeah.
we can then ask questions from you. But now I have a pleasure to introduce our speakers from Vanderbilt and Brown, but we have first Chrissy from Brown University starting. So please welcome.
Great, thank you. We'll just get the presentation changed over, but hi to those of you in person. Hi to everyone who is joining us remotely. I'm Chrissy Fulton-Lamarve. I'm the Senior Associate Director of International Admission in the Office of College Admission at Brown. So I oversee our international recruitment and selection processes. I also read applications from parts of Europe and South Asia. So students who apply from Finland, I'm one of the people who reads their applications. So I can talk to you a little bit today about what Brown has to offer in terms of what our location is like, our student academic experience, student life, and then Shane and I will, at the end of the session, talk about the admission process and financial aid after Shane has a chance to introduce you to Vanderbilt. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so Brown University was founded in 1764. It's the 7th oldest college in the United States. And the reason that we mention that is not because we think that you are choosing your college based on how old it is, but because the founding of the school really does influence the mission of the university and what we're hoping to do today. So when Brown was founded, it was the colony of Rhode Island was actually the first to be founded on the basis of religious freedom. They broke away from the Massachusetts Bay Colony because they wanted to be able to practice religion in their own way. And so the university followed that lead, and it was the first college in the US to admit students regardless of their religious affiliation. So throughout its entire history, the university has been really committed to freedom of thought and diversity of background, and that still absolutely continues today. We are located in Providence, Rhode Island. Have any of you heard of Providence or Rhode Island before? Okay, great. So thank you, Shane. I'm glad Shane has. So Providence is the capital of the state of Rhode Island, one of the smallest states in the United States. We're about an hour south of the city of Boston. We're about 3.5 hours northeast of New York City. So lots of trains and buses that take you to those two cities. They're also the Providence airport is just a 15-minute drive to campus. So it's easy to get out to the outside world beyond Providence. We really love the city of Providence. It's a very fun, smaller city. It's the second largest metro area in New England. Boston is the largest city in New England, but Providence is the second largest metro area. Some of the biggest industries in the city of Providence are things like biotechnology, arts and entertainment. The food and restaurant industry is also very huge in Providence. That's my personal favorite part. It's a great foodie city, lots of wonderful different styles of food. It is a very easy city for students to be able to get out to explore, whether it's on foot or on bicycle. Also, your Brown ID gets you free rides on the buses that go all over the city and all over the state. So if you want to, go to the other side of the city for a great meal with your friends, or go 45 minutes south to one of the many beaches along the many miles of coastline that Rhode Island has, you can do that all for free using your Brown ID. And then our campus is located on the east side of the city in a neighborhood called College Hill. It's just about a 10-minute walk from downtown Providence, but we've really got our own contained campus where it's sort of your traditional New England college campus, a series of greens that are surrounded by buildings where the vast majority of our students live. And those students, there are about 7,000 undergraduate students. Then we have about 2,500 graduate students and 600 medical students. So about 10,000 students total attending Brown at any one time, with the emphasis really on the undergraduate students. So those who are going for a bachelor's degree. And those students do come from all over the world. Like Carolina said, the diversity of our student body is really important to us. So students are coming from all 50 US states. Our international students make up about 14% of the student population, and that's international students who are holding a passport only for a country other than the United States. When you factor in dual citizens, US citizens who have grown up abroad or gone to school abroad, it's more like 17 or 18% of our student body is internationally identifying. And those students are coming to us from over 100 different countries. So there's certainly a wide diversity of background and perspective, and that is incredibly important to us. We feel that our students learn just as much from each other as they are learning from our faculty members. The most important thing to talk about when we talk about Brown is that we have an open curriculum. And this is something that's fairly rare in the United States. I think there are probably fewer than 15 other colleges and universities that offer an open curriculum. So it really sets Brown apart. When you're learning about American universities, you're hearing probably that some of them have a core curriculum, so a set series of classes that they think it's very important for every student to take. Other schools have distribution requirements or general education requirements, like you just heard Patrick talk about at Yale, where there are some broad categories in which they ask students to take classes. We don't have either of those at Brown. We are asking students to be the architects of their own education and to make decisions for themselves about the classes that they're most interested in, what they think will best prepare them for the path that they hope to follow after they've been at Brown. So it's designed to be a rigorous but incredibly flexible system of education. There are, of course, some requirements that you have to complete in order to earn that Brown degree. So you need to do 8 semesters worth of study, so 4 years worth of work. You need to pass at least 30 classes. Most students graduate with 32 to 34 because they're typically taking 4, occasionally 5 classes a semester. They need to take 2 writing intensive courses. Those can be in basically any discipline. It's just a class that has a heavy emphasis on writing, and that's because we think everyone needs strong communication skills, no matter what path you intend to follow after Brown. And then finally, you need to be able to declare and complete at least 1 concentration. And a concentration is what Brown calls majors. We like to have our own names for things at Brown. There are about 80 different concentrations that exist, so you have a wide array of choices there. It's also possible to create your own independent concentration if one of those 80 does not fit what you're hoping to do. You have until the end of your sophomore year to declare a concentration. So again, like Carolina said, a lot of flexibility, a lot of time to explore and make up your mind about what you'd like to focus on. For the concentrations at Brown, they can take anywhere between 10 to 20 classes to complete. Engineering, those concentrations tend to be on the higher end. The majority of the concentrations at Brown take between 10 to 15 courses to complete. So maybe a third to a half of the classes that you would complete at Brown would be for your concentration. Outside of the classes that are required outside of the classes required for your concentration, you are choosing every single other class that you take while you're at Brown. So it means that you are really invested in every class that you're taking, and also so is everyone else in the classroom with you, which makes for a very nice learning environment. We really try to emphasize close relationships and learning opportunities with our professors. So the 6-to-1 student to faculty ratio, we try to see that play itself out in the classroom as much as possible with small discussion heavy style of classes. We do have some larger classes each year. About 3 to 5% of our classes have 100 students or more in them. for those usually larger introductory style classes that they keep big so everyone can get into those right off the bat and explore that field. They'll meet a couple times a week as the full lecture, and then they break down into discussion sections or lab sections of just 15 students or fewer. So you still get that smaller experience every week in some of those larger classes. And there are two main tools in place to help students really make the most and explore with the open curriculum. So one of those is the shopping period. Have any of you heard of a shopping period before? No, it's American, right? Shopping, it tracks. So many schools in the US have a shopping period or an add drop period. So for the first week or two, typically of the semester, students can change their minds about what classes they'd like to take. And so maybe add a class in one area, drop a class they had originally planned to take. At Brown, it is really about shopping around. And so for the first 2 weeks of the semester, students plan to take, again, 4 to 5 classes a semester, but they shop 6, 7, 8, 10. I heard of a student once who did shopped over 20 classes for a semester. And that means spending the first 2 weeks going to 8 different classes so that you can make a really well-informed decision about, which subject material is the most interesting to you, which professor's teaching style fits you the best, so that you really know what you're getting yourself into when you take your classes that semester. The other tool that we have in place is the grading option. So students have the first 4 weeks of each semester to decide if they would like to take the class for a traditional letter grade. We do A, B, C grades, or if they'd like to take the class SNC, which stands for satisfactory or no credit, which is Brown's version of a pass-fail class. So you don't receive a letter grade. If you pass the class, you get an S, a satisfactory. If you don't pass the class, it just says no credit, and it doesn't actually end up showing up on your transcript. It's just sort of not there anymore. And so you have the first 4 weeks to decide. You can see how things are going. There's no limit to the number of classes that a student can take SNC. That's because the university really wants to encourage students to challenge themselves. So to get out of their comfort zones, maybe to take a class in an area they've never taken a class in before, or to take a class in an area that maybe hasn't always been a strength for them academically, but they know that's a really important field of knowledge for them to develop. Most students end up doing about 1 in 6 of their classes SMC, so maybe 1 a semester or 1 a year, but it's a really great way to encourage students to explore. And just to give you one quick fun story about a student who really made the most of both the shopping period and the grading option. One of our tour guides a couple years ago was a double concentrator, so you can have 2 concentrations if you want to, and he was doing computer science and classics. And during the shopping period, he ended up in the wrong classroom. He just looked at the schedule wrong. He, 10 minutes into the lecture, hopefully not that long, he realized that he was in the wrong classroom, and it was actually an upper level Greek politics class, which was not something, he studied ancient Greece, but he didn't know that much about modern Greece. But to be polite, he thought he should stay for the rest of the class. And by the end of the class, he was like, that was absolutely fascinating. I think I'm actually going to sign up for this class. He knew that he had the option to take the class SNC, so he didn't feel really worried about, how he would do academically. He just thought it would be a great opportunity for him to learn. After the first few weeks, he was actually doing really well in the class, so he did end up taking it for a grade, but having the grading option in place sort of lowered the barrier to entry and made him feel really confident about trying something new. And having that shopping period made that exploration really easy for him. So many students have similar experiences. Another very important part of the undergraduate student experience is getting involved in research. A vast majority of students will graduate having had at least one research experience during their time at Brown, if not more. So you can see 1,000 students get involved in research each academic year. Another 700 or so will get involved in the summertime. For those students doing it in the summertime, that's very often funded by these UTRA awards, undergraduate teaching and research awards. So that's basically that student's paid job for the summertime, which can be a great option if that's something that you're interested in. It can also be done for course credit. Research is happening in every discipline at Brown, so not just the STEM fields, but also in the arts, humanities, the social sciences. Students are getting involved as early as freshman year, if that's something that you're interested in. So many ways to get hands-on experience as part of your academic studies at Brown. And then outside of the classroom, there is a lot happening at Brown. We've got about 300 clubs and organizations that exist for students to choose from. The most popular way for students to get involved is through service work or civic engagement. About 75% of our students do get involved in that during their time at Brown. So they'll be volunteering in the local Providence Public Schools, or they will be working on some environmental initiatives for coastal Rhode Island with eroding coastlines. Or one of the most popular groups is Brown Votes, which is a bipartisan get out the vote effort where they do voter registration and education. So a lot of ways to get involved in service. Also, the arts are very popular at Brown. About 60% of our students get involved in the arts, whether that's visual arts or performing arts. We just had a new performing arts building that was completed on campus and opened in the fall. That's over 100,000 square feet. The main hall of that space, the Lindemann Performing Arts Center, can be set up in 5 very different configurations to support all these different styles of presentation and performance. So that's an amazing new opportunity for us. And then also varsity sports. We have in athletics, we have 34 varsity sports that compete in Division I of the NCAA, which is the highest level of athletic competition in the United States. Also compete in the Ivy League Athletic Conference. We also have club sports and intramural sports, which are still, a good way to be involved, but not quite at that same varsity level. Although our men's rugby team, which is the club sport, won the national championship last year. So there are some club sports that are competing at a very high level as well. So this gives you just a quick taste of some of the more than 300 different ways to get involved outside the classroom. I also just want to say a word about what sort of the atmosphere and the environment is like at Brown, and that has been really influenced by the open curriculum. So students at Brown really pride themselves on having what they say is a culture of kindness and questioning. So for that culture of kindness, because we have this open curriculum where every student is following their own path, students don't feel like they are being compared to one another. So they don't feel like they need to be competitive with one another. It's a really supportive and collaborative and kind environment. And then for that culture of questioning, the open curriculum itself actually grew out of student activism in the 1960s. And so students at Brown today really know that it's a place where their voices are heard and they can affect change, and they really want to live up to that legacy. And so they are always questioning things in the classroom and out, and they are always thinking about, how can I use my education to make a difference and to have an impact? And that's really sort of the overarching feel that you get among the students on campus. And the vast majority of them are on campus, so guarantee housing all 4 years for students. They are required to live on campus for the first 2 years at least. The vast majority of students are living on campus for their 3rd year, and then about 50% of seniors will move off campus. And there's a lot of housing, a lot of apartments right around the edges of campus. So those seniors who are living off campus are right next to it. So still very easy for them to get to classes and be involved in everything that's happening in terms of student life, and lots of dining options as well. There are a variety of different meal plans available. The dining services staff is wonderful about catering to different dietary needs, restrictions, whatever that might be. So I mentioned Providence is a great foodie city. It is, and there's also great food on campus, which is also very important. And where might this take you once you leave Brown? We have a great center for career exploration, which will start working with students as early as freshman year if they want to start thinking about life after Brown. At that point, they'll help students explore different career paths, do job shadowing, help them with internships, and then through the job search process or graduate school search process as well, if that's something that they're thinking about. Typically at graduation, about 70 to 75% of Brown alumni leave with a job offer in hand. About 20 to 25% leave with an offer of admission to graduate school in hand. And later in life, about 75% of Brown alumni go on to earn a further degree beyond their bachelor's degree. So a master's, a PhD, a professional degree like law, business, medicine. So it's definitely a commitment to lifelong learning among the Brown community. And that community ends up all over the world. So we've got about 118,000 alumni out there in the world right now in 152 different countries. So it's really a global network, and that network is available to support students. So in addition to the Center for Career Exploration, Brown's global network of alumni is also incredibly helpful. I'll be meeting some of them in London on Saturday, where they're holding a big event for us. So it's really an engaged group of people who really care deeply about the university. So I will wrap up there with just one more point I want to make. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but Brown is extremely excited to be joining the list of schools that Carolina had put on her list earlier, in our next application cycle. So starting this fall, we are going need blind for international citizens. So we'd previously been need blind for US citizens and permanent residents, but starting with the next application cycle, we will be need blind for all international students as well, which we are so excited about. The university has done a lot of fundraising from that amazing network of Brown alumni alumni all over the world so that we can do this, which means that we won't have to take into consideration whether or not a student needs financial aid as we're making their admissions decisions. So we are thrilled about that. We'll talk more about that later, but that's our big news that is part of why I am traveling the world right now to spread that message. So I hope some of that might have sounded interesting to some of you. Here's where you can go to learn a little bit more about the university, but I will turn it over to my friend Shane.
Right. It's a tough act to follow, but I will do my best. How's everybody doing? Doing all right? It's a lot of information to sort of take in there. But again, hello. My name is Shane McGuire from Vanderbilt. Hello to you that are tuning in online as well. I have pretty much the same role that Chrissy has at Brown at Vanderbilt. So I oversee all of our international recruitment and selection, but particularly work with students from Europe, UK. So I do look at every applicant from Finland as well. And actually, this is my third time in your country in probably the past couple of years. So excited to be back, and at least the sun is shining despite it being a little bit colder here than it is in Nashville. But I'm adjusting. I will be okay. So you are like, it's warm out there. I don't know what you're talking about. So, but I'll just kind of dive right in, and I use this to sort of frame kind of what you're going to experience at Vanderbilt. These are three themes are very important to sort of what you will find during your experience. We very much have a community that is built around collaboration. So even though it's considered a highly selective sort of competitive institution to get into in the United States, that does not carry over at all to the culture that you find on campus. Students are working together in the classroom, outside the classroom. They are all really striving to succeed, really to sort of celebrate each other's successes. That is what you will find in that student body. We, again, are very deliberate about the community that we are creating. We're bringing in students from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, because we want you to be sitting across the table from someone who may think differently than you, who may challenge those perspectives, but we build these classroom discussions around civil discourse. We want to have those hard conversations, but do that in a civil way. And as much as you're going to learn from our faculty, you're going to learn even more from your friends, your peers that are coming from sort of all different backgrounds. So we're very intentional about that. And then we want you to find that balance while you're there. Yes, we're going to push you academically. We're going to challenge you. And I think you want that in an academic experience. But we're also not going to lock you in one of our libraries for all 4 years either. We want you plugging into the community. We want you finding sort of that place in our student body and finding that sort of sense of belonging as well. And our students do a really great job of that as well. If you're looking at institutions in the United States, we fall kind of nicely into this medium-sized category, a little over 7,000 undergraduate students. You can see a sizable graduate professional students as well. And again, students are coming from kind of all across the world. And that is part of why I'm out traveling all different parts of the world. I have a whole team, some of which are also in other parts of the world right now, because we want to bring students from different countries, from different backgrounds to our campus. Right now, we are 10% international, but we have a directive to really grow that on our campus. Our president is very adamant about us having even a larger global reach. This year's incoming class will likely be around 12 to 13% international with continued representation across the world. So very excited to continue seeing international students grow on our campus. To give you a sense of sort of where we're located in the United States, because I know when you look at the country, you may be more familiar with some of these bigger coastal cities. And often if you were to fly into the United States, you would more than likely come in through Boston, New York, DC, something like that. And we're a pretty short flight from there down to Nashville. We're right in the heart of the city. You're about 15 minutes from the airport. You're about 3 kilometers from the center of downtown. So you're kind of right in the heart of this urban center. And it's in a part of the country that's known for being very welcoming, very friendly. I think it's a kind of one of these cities that as soon as you hop off that airplane, you're going to very much feel at home. You're going to feel very welcome there. You also get a really nice mix of all 4 seasons. It's significantly warmer there right now. Today, I looked at the forecast and I was like, oh, it looks really nice there today. But you're kind of right in the midst of everything. And Nashville's about 2 million people. So it's about considered probably a medium-sized city in the United States. But it's also the fastest growing city. So there were 2 million people there when I left a few days ago. Who knows how many are there now? But lots of people are moving to Nashville. And it's a really sort of fun, vibrant city. Provides our students with a lot of amazing professional development opportunities. You can see here a handful of some of the bigger companies and corporations that have headquarters or operations that are happening in Nashville. We have a lot going on in finance and business, entrepreneurship, huge number of hospitals. Hospital management is something big in Nashville. And we are also big in the music industry. That is probably what Nashville is known for best. We are often referred to as Music City, USA, or sometimes the country music capital of the world. For those of you here in person, does anybody like country music?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, I've got some fans in the room. Some of you are looking at me like, not at all. And that's okay. You do not have to love country music to be in Nashville. I'll be honest with you. I myself am not a huge country music fan. I can tolerate it, but it's not my favorite. But any band or artist that may be doing a tour across the United States will almost certainly come to Nashville. So we host a lot of concerts in the city. We also host 2 big concert series on campus every year that are free for students, and they very much enjoy taking advantage of that. I know Chrissy talked a lot about the food scene in Providence. You also have a pretty amazing food scene in Nashville as well. We both, I think, are also foodies ourselves. We enjoy taking advantage of the local food scene. But just within walking distance of campus, you have about 80 coffee shops, cafes. I mentioned coffee shops because I know how big coffee is here in Finland. Lots of great coffee in Nashville, but lots of great restaurants around within walking distance. And your meal plan that you will have as a student actually works at about 30 places off campus. So it allows you to kind of get out into the city and use that meal plan that you're already having to explore the city. You also have amazing dining on campus. We're consistently like top 10 in the country for sort of best campus food. So you will eat very well during your 4 years on campus. So a very fun city to sort of be in as a student. Bringing you back to campus a little bit and talking about sort of the academic experience, which is definitely a little bit different than what Chrissy sort of talked about with the very open curriculum that you have at Brown. Here, you do have a lot of flexibility, which I know is a big sort of reason to look at the United States, as our system has a lot of flexibility in the curriculum. But you are sort of picking one of these schools as a home base. So when you apply to Vanderbilt, you're not just applying to the university, you're actually picking one of these 4 schools as your home base. That being said, once you have that sort of home base picked, you can take classes in any of these 4 schools. Students will do majors, and yes, we do majors, not concentrations, but you can do majors across schools. You can do more than one major in a school. So there's still a lot of flexibility. At the center of everything that we do is this College of Arts and Science. And so this really embodies that liberal arts that you may hear about in the United States, where you can come in, be undecided those first couple years before you have to decide what you're going to study. Lots of different options. So if you are approaching that application and you're like, I have no idea what I want to study, or I have a bunch of different things I'm interested in, that is absolutely the place to look. And that houses about 50 of our 70 different majors. The other 3 schools are going to be a little more specialized in terms of what you're doing. So if you're interested in engineering or computer science, that's housed over in that School of Engineering. But even when you apply to that school, you actually have your first year to kind of decide which area of engineering or computer science you may want to actually study. These other 2 schools, you are applying directly to a major on the front end. So you're tied in a little bit more to what you might be doing, but oftentimes the education and music students are a little bit more set coming in sort of what they want to do. And our education school also has some really fascinating psychology type programs, specifically around child studies, child development, organizational dynamics, cognitive studies. So there's some really cool things they're doing over there, even outside of education. Then that School of Music primarily focuses on classical music, but they also have concentrations in jazz as well. So picking, again, one school as a home base, but we have students that do things in all 4 schools, across schools. So you'll still find that flexibility that you hear about. We also put a big emphasis on having experiences outside the classroom. Students are engaging in research. They may be going abroad for a semester or a summer. They might be doing creative type experiences. Maybe they're directing a play in the theater department. Maybe they're putting on an art exhibit because they're an art major. They might be doing service learning projects. They might be doing hands-on work in an internship or shadowing in a hospital or something like that. We really want students to have these immersive experiences outside the classroom. And a lot of our students engage in research as well. We are a huge research university, and a lot of our undergrads dive into that as well. And you will have fantastic access to faculty. They all teach their classes. They all hold office hours where students can come by and ask questions. And many of them live in the residence halls alongside our students. So all of our students live on campus all 4 years, but we sort of have this living learning model where we will have faculty that may have an apartment in each of these sort of residence halls so that you can have sort of those interactions with faculty outside of just that classroom type setting. And I know sometimes when you hear like, oh, there's a faculty member living down the hall from me, like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I promise these will be some of the coolest people that you interact with during your time. And also, I think it makes faculty a lot more approachable as a student when you see them in the dining hall or they're walking their dog around campus at night. And we want you to approach faculty. They want to get to know you and build those relationships with you during your time there. There's also a lot going on outside the classroom, tons of different things to get involved in, 475 different student organizations. And we make that super easy for you. On your third day of class, they will have this huge organization fair where you can go around, talk to students, learn about what's going on, find out the different things that you might want to get plugged into. These are just a handful of some of the organizations that you might find there on campus. And then we also have a lot going on in terms of sports as well. We are Division I. We are part of one of the big major conferences in sort of the southeast part of the country. I would argue it's the best conference, but I am a little partial to that. But you get free tickets to all sporting events. So going out on game day, supporting the athletes, kind of getting into that school spirit could certainly be part of your experience if you'd like that to be. You'll find club sports, intramurals as well if you want to be involved athletically. So lots of different things to really plug into. And again, it goes back to that theme around balance that I talked about at the beginning. And then the last thing I really sort of want to hone in on, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more too, is again, this sort of financial piece. We are a need-aware institution for international students. That being said, for any student that we admit, whether they're in the US, whether they are abroad, we are meeting 100% of your need, whatever it is, with no loans. And because I am here in Finland, I can also talk about, which Carolina talked about at the beginning, is that scholarship that we have specifically for Finnish students, called the Roby Scholarship. That was something that was started by one of our alums who originally is from Finland, came to Vanderbilt, had a wonderful experience, and was like, hey, I want more Finnish students to be able to have this experience. And so we're really, really lucky to have that scholarship. We typically, try to get a student from Finland every year, every other year when we can. I think right now we currently have 2 currently on campus and then 1 that will be coming in this fall. Typically, I would have one of my students on campus, just like Patrick would have kind of come on and told you about that. Maria is the one who's done it the past couple of times I've been here. Unfortunately, she had an exam during this time. So I told her, I was like, I guess your exam is more important than zooming in on my presentation. But she sends her best. She loves tuning into these. And if you do want to ever connect with her, she is more than happy to answer any questions about what it's like to be on our campus. But she is wonderful, loving her experience on our campus. So sad she's not here today. All right, so that's kind of the end of kind of what I wanted to talk about around Vanderbilt. If you want to learn more, these are some great ways to kind of connect with us, either on social media, online. Fantastic virtual tour that you can do if you want to see kind of what campus really looks like. But at this point, we did want to take just a couple minutes maybe here at the end and talk about some of these bigger things around sort of applying to the United States, how we evaluate the application, because there's a lot of pieces there. We like to make it super complicated in the United States. So there's a lot of things we look at. We'll talk a little about sort of the logistics of applying and then kind of a little bit more about the financial assistance. So I'll turn it back over to Chrissy to get us started.
Thanks, Shane. So the American higher education system is a bit complicated for everyone. We know it is particularly different for international students for whom this is a very different process of university acceptance. So schools like Brown, Vanderbilt, Yale, many of the sort of most well-known, and they're known as highly selective. So the colleges and universities that receive far more applications from qualified students than they have space for on campus. So that's the highly selective part of it. Those schools practice what is known as holistic admissions, which means that the admission committees are thinking about the whole application and the whole person as they make their decisions. So there are no GPAs or standardized test results that would guarantee a student admission to our schools. There's also no GPA or standardized test result that would automatically disqualify them, so no cutoffs below which we wouldn't consider applicants. We are really trying to consider all of the different pieces. So it's not a set formula that we plug things into that determines the decisions. Our former dean of admission in the Brown admission office, who retired at this point, not just a few years ago, but we still like to quote him because he would always say, if you've met one Brown student, you've met one Brown student. And so he really saw it as the mission of a holistic review process to make it difficult to describe your typical Brown student, because there are so many different types of students who would thrive at a place like Brown, at a place like Vanderbilt, at a place like Yale as well. And so these processes are looking at applicants in sort of three main categories. So we're thinking about who each applicant is as a student. That academic piece does always come first because we are academic institutions, so thinking about how a student has performed in their setting, that's a really crucial part of it. This holistic review process is individualized, it's also contextualized. And so that means we're not expecting your curriculum or your grades to look like they would if you were attending a school just outside of Providence in Rhode Island. We read applications regionally. Shane and I mentioned, both of us read applications from Finland. We do that all over the world so that admission officers can become familiar with the curricular options that are available in different places and the grading systems that are used, so that we can say, okay, within your school, within the classes that were available to you, within the grading system or scale that was used at your school, how have you performed in that setting? So we're thinking about a student's academic performance contextually. There are many pieces that go into that academic review. One of those might be standardized tests. So Vanderbilt and Brown are a little bit different on this. So Brown is returning to requiring either the SAT or the ACT in order to apply to Brown. There are some other schools in the US who have already returned to that or will be. Then schools like Vanderbilt are remaining test optional. So that will be an important thing to look at as you're exploring American universities. One thing to know about those standardized tests, whether a school is requiring them or is test optional, it's one piece of the process. So there are many pieces that go into that academic review. The standardized testing can be helpful. A place like Brown, one of the reasons we're requiring it is because it can be helpful to have one common piece of information from all of our applications when we're seeing applicants from over 10,000 different high schools. So many different grading options and curricular options chosen by those students. It's helpful to have one piece of information that is common among all of our applicants. So that's part of that academic review process. Also for international students, thinking about English proficiency, that's going to be really important at places like Vanderbilt and at Brown. Our schools don't have ESL classes or English as a second language classes. So students really do need to come in with a high level of proficiency, ready to dive right into the level of rigor. So our schools will accept things like the TOEFL, the IELTS, the Duolingo test of English. And those are, at a place like Brown, recommended for international students for whom English is not their primary language spoken at home. At Vanderbilt, they also say if English has been the primary language of instruction at your school, you don't need to take a test. But for Brown, we're saying recommended if English is not the primary language spoken at home. If you feel, though, that your application can demonstrate strong proficiency in English in other ways, maybe through other standardized tests or through your writing, through what your teachers say about you, it's really just important for us to know that students can come to our campus and succeed. That's the number one thing. We want everyone to come to our schools and have a great experience. And then also with that academic review piece is also thinking about what your recommenders say about you. So, they tell us a bit more about the student behind the grades and the courses that are listed on the transcript. So all of that goes into that academic review piece. That's the first piece that we're thinking about with these applications, though, and it's not the only one. We start there, but then we say, okay, if a student is looking good academically, we're also thinking about who they are outside the classroom. So how they've gotten involved beyond academics. What are the things that they care about? So we have a broad conception of what that could be. Certainly that's any clubs you've done or sports or the arts. It's also if you've held a job. any volunteer work that you've done, involvement with a religious organization, family responsibilities like babysitting younger siblings, whatever it is that you're doing outside the classroom. We really love to hear about that, how you've been spending your time. It tells us more about you, and it also helps us to imagine how you might engage outside the classroom at our universities. We both talked a lot about all the ways to do that, and we want to know that students will engage with that. And then the final piece is thinking about who each applicant is as a person. There is no set personality type that we're looking for. Like I said, you've met one Brown student, you've met one Brown student. So there are a lot of personalities on a campus like Brown's. But what we do want to get a sense of through these applications is the perspective that you would bring to our campus and who you would be as a roommate, as a teammate, clubmate, classmate. All of those things are important to us. And so some of the pieces that we use for that are going to be things like the essay. We know that the college essay, the American college essay, is particularly different to international students for whom that type of personal writing is not something that you've engaged in a lot before. We are familiar with that. We love these essays because they give us a chance to get to learn a little bit more about the human behind the application. We get to hear from you, about you, to learn a little bit more about that person. Many schools in the United States, like Brown and Vanderbilt, also have a supplement. So, at Brown, we call it the Brown Writing Supplement, that has a few additional short answer questions. So not as extensive as the essay, but it's another opportunity for you to share a little bit more about yourself, and particularly tell us a little bit more about your interest in Brown. And many schools have something like that. So that's another chance for us to get to know you a little bit better. And then there are also some other ways that in the American higher ed review process, you can share more about yourself. So some schools are offering interviews. Sometimes those might be with admission officers. Sometimes those are with alumni of the university. If they're alumni interviews, sometimes it might be someone who's living in your town or nearby. Sometimes they're done on Zoom. Neither of our schools are offering interviews anymore, but we included that on there because for many American universities, that can still be an important part of the process. Some schools, like Brown, are now having the opportunity to submit a short video to us. So we call it at Brown the video introduction. It's just 2 minutes long maximum. It does not need to be anything fancy. This isn't something you need to hire a videographer or do fancy editing on. Truly just, a 2-minute selfie video or talking to your laptop camera, telling us a little bit more about yourself. So we love those because it really gives us a chance to see the human being behind the application and to learn something more about you. It's often a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit more fun, something that you didn't necessarily write about in your application, but that is still really important to you. So that can be a part of the review process. And then some other pieces that schools are taking into consideration might be an audition for a music school or an art portfolio, a resume that you want to include, whatever that might be. All of these factors are considered as we're thinking about who you are as a student, as a community member, and as a person. And that's really that holistic review process. What, did I forget anything?
I think you covered it all.
Okay, great.
You guys got it figured out now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll just quickly touch on some of this because I want to make sure we also have lots of time for Q&A as well. But the actual logistics of applying, right? Chrissy really did a great job saying how we evaluate all the factors that we look at. But when you actually apply, you're going to have some options in terms of what you do. I think a lot of students use what we refer to as the common application, which is accepted about 800 different schools. So it allows you, instead of having to fill out a separate application for every single school, you can go in, fill out the majority of the information on this one application that goes to all these schools. And you may just have to fill out some smaller supplements for certain schools if they have a supplement, but it does make your life a little bit easier. Vanderbilt also takes something called the coalition application, which is the same type of idea. It's just accepted at like 150 different schools. So a little bit smaller. When you see schools that accept more than one application, this does not mean that you have to fill out both. Actually, please don't fill out both. That sounds like a lot of work, but we don't have a preference as to which one you use. So feel free to take a look at those. Which one do you like better? Which one makes more sense for the schools you're applying to? Feel free to use that one. And then you can see kind of up there at the top that you're going to find some early plans when you're looking in the United States. And then you also have something called regular decision as well. Both of us offer what's called early decision, which is something where you're essentially almost entering in a contract with us that says, hey, if admitted, I'm going to come to your institution. So you're kind of like really sure that that is the school that you want to go to. you're ready to make that commitment. You've really kind of done the homework on sort of that financial aid piece. You feel comfortable with either paying the full cost or potentially estimated financial aid that you're seeing. It feels right for you and your family. You can kind of enter that agreement. Vanderbilt has 2 of those. You're welcome, I guess, but they operate the same. They just have different deadlines. So typically an early program is going to be in November, but if you see an early decision too, and we're not the only school in the US that has that, that's generally going to be a later timeline. Ours is January 1st, but it still has that sort of binding component to it. And then every school out there is going to have a regular decision. So this is where like you're not bound to going if you get in. It allows you to sort of put your application into a lot of different schools. You get to hear back about those decisions, typically late March or at least by April 1st. And then you have a chance to sort of compare all those decisions, kind of see how you feel about things, and then you kind of make that decision. So, and then again, we've talked a lot about some of this, but there are just a lot of ways to fund sort of your education to the US. And that falls in sort of this need-based financial aid, and there's also merit-based aid as well. So we've talked a little about sort of the need blind, the need aware piece, and the fact that if admitted, particularly to our institutions, and I believe this is the case at Yale as well, meeting 100% with no loans as well, which is big. So for any student that we choose to admit, we are meeting all the need that you have. And we're thinking about truly that total cost of attendance. I think Patrick talked a little bit about this. Like it's not just the tuition or even just the housing and meals, but also thinking about the cost for books, what that would be, your travel to and from our campuses every year. We're really thinking, what is that total cost to be at our institution for a year? Then are you able to contribute to that at all? Maybe you are, maybe you're not, but then we're going to fill in the rest with sort of that financial aid piece. And there are going to be some schools in the US that do also offer merit-based scholarships. And sometimes when you submit that admissions application, you are automatically considered for those. And there's other schools where you may have to apply separately for those, and they may have different deadlines. Vanderbilt is an example of that. Our scholarship deadline is December 1st, which kind of falls right in the middle of all our other deadlines. We didn't have enough deadlines, so we added some more. But again, those are definitely worth looking at as well, as those can be other great ways to fund your sort of educational experience. So I will stop there because we ran over just a little bit on sort of the presentation, but I think we still have lots of time for questions. So happy to open that up to you here in person. I know folks online were probably typing in questions, but happy to open it up.
Thank you so much, Shane and Chrissy. We will now open it up for questions. Maybe we can take one question from here from the office first.
Do we want to put Patrick back up on the screen too?
Yes, that would be great. Let's do it.
I can't get out of the presentation.
Good point.
I don't.
Let's see.
I think you
I have too many computers.
Yeah.
going.
A lot of screens.
I'll take this if you don't need it.
Yeah, we don't need it for anything else.
Right.
So
Yeah, maybe we can start with
Yeah,
that question here.
I had a question about the early decision program.
sure.
What is the main difference other than just the time? Like, is there any specific advantage of applying early?
So you're going to probably find that some questions that you ask us is it depends on the institution in the US, but we will try to speak as broadly as we can. Some institutions will say like there isn't really an advantage to doing that. We sort of approach those the same way. Other institutions will say, yes, there is a statistical advantage to that, or we even have a preference for early decision students. But I would say generally speaking, the acceptance rate is going to be a little more favorable in early decision, and that is mostly based on the quantity of applications. So using us as examples, we typically see 5,000 or 6,000 early decision students in our pool, and we see about 40,000 plus in regular decision. So you will see differences in acceptance rate. That being said, the caliber of students that we take in those processes don't look any different. It's more of a numbers that can sort of drive that. So it is sometimes easier to stick out or stand out when you're applying and compared to sort of 5,000 students as opposed to 40,000 students. So anything you want to add on?
No,
that?
So it's better to apply early.
So yes, so from a statistical advantage, sure. But you want to make sure that you have really done that thoughtful college search, that it makes sense for you in this process. and that you really want to be at that institution. I do remind students, if you do early decision somewhere and you get in, you do have to go. So you want to make sure you actually really want to be there, right? You're not just doing it because of the advantage. But if you really feel like I've done this search, there is a school that is clearly my number one, and I want to sort of make that decision, great.
So that means you can only make one early decision application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can only go to one school? Hey, there's a few questions online. What are your stances for IB students? Any special treatment, language proficiency, etc.?
We both have many IB students on our campuses, hundreds, I'd say. I'm assuming the same is
Yes.
true at Yale as well. At Brown, it is the most common international curricula that we see among our incoming students. So we're very familiar with it in our admission offices and our review processes. Because of that holistic review process, there is not a set IB score that you have to have. There's not a set required of you must take these classes and it must be these ones at HL and these ones at SL. That's going to be different for every student. We do tend to see students who are achieving very highly in the IB. I think it would be safe to say primarily earning 6s and 7s on their IB examinations. In terms of special treatment, as Shane said, for many of these questions, our answer is going to be, it depends on the institution. So every school is going to have a different way that they look at those. At a place like Brown, strong results on IB exams will be used for placement purposes. So it will allow you to place out of more introductory level courses and go right into more advanced work in that area. There are some rare instances where it might be used for course credit, but for the most part, it is used for placement for students on campus.
And to give you another example, we will give you credit for 6s and 7s on higher level exams, but it could also be used for placement as well. So I've seen it kind of done both, and I think schools handle that a little bit differently. And while this wasn't necessarily asked, if you're not in an IB curriculum, if you're in a national curriculum or in a different curriculum, we also don't have a preference over which curriculum that you are doing. We want to see within the curriculum that you are a part of, you are taking advantage of opportunities, you are performing well. But it is our job, and this is why we divide up the entire world. We have like regional and country specialists. It's our job to get to know the nuances of different curriculums, but we know that curriculums all across the world can prepare students for life in the US. But we are very familiar. Yeah, I think IB is definitely our number one as well.
Yeah, please go ahead.
You guys probably also know there are like predicted grades and final grades. So if, let's say, my predicted grade is lower than my final grade, what's the application then happen?
Yeah, so, the offers of admission that we send out do say that the offer of admission is contingent upon you completing the year in the same academic standing at which you were admitted. So we do spend a lot of our summers going over final results for students, not because it's a super fun way to spend your summer looking at final transcripts, but because we have heard from our faculty members that the students who have the toughest time transitioning from high school to college are the students who had the biggest drops of grades in their final years. So we do take it seriously for that reason. That said, there's not a set sort of drop in your performance that would, decide the decision for you. But if we do see a substantial drop from your predicted grades to the actual grades that you've earned, we will be reaching out to you to find out what happened. And it could potentially put an offer of admission in jeopardy if it is a really substantial
What
drop.
if it's a substantial increase, not drop?
Then we say, wonderful
Yeah.
job. We are so proud of you.
An increase is always great.
Yes.
And I will say, I appreciate that we will, and I can't speak for every institution, but I think most would do this. If there is a substantial drop, we are always going to reach out first to see what, because life happens sometimes, right? There could be all sorts of things that could have affected this. We want to know maybe what happened. And if something did happen, hey, let's figure out a way around this. We're not just going to immediately give away your offer of admission.
Yeah.
So we want to understand. We will always reach out about that. And I will say it is very rare for us to rescind an offer of admission, but and it's not a fun thing when we have to.
No.
So again, hopefully this will not be an issue. But yeah, an increase is always great. So.
All right, another question. Does age matter when applying? Are you at a disadvantage if you are 20-year-old while many other appliers are a few years younger?
No, and in fact, I think we are seeing probably more and more older students apply because I think, and again, this depends on where you are in the world, but we see a lot more gap years, I think, these days. And again, that can be very popular in some places versus others. So we have a lot of students who may be a little bit older that are applying, and that is perfectly fine.
Yeah, absolutely same.
Great. Then we have Kristen here.
Right. Well, is there like a specific preference between AP and IB classes in admissions? And overall, statistically, do IB diploma program students how do they fare in the acceptance rate? So they usually have, a higher acceptance rate. And is this IB diploma program, how well is it recognized just overall in admissions?
Right. So we do not have preferences for AP, IB, A-levels, Finnish national curriculum, whatever it is. If you are lucky enough to have a choice, that is fantastic. We say choose the curriculum that best fits your interests and your learning style. If you choose the curriculum that best fits the areas you want to learn about and the way that you learn, you're going to do the best in that curriculum, and then you're going to look the best as an applicant. So we are familiar with, as Shane said, different curricular options all over the world. And so we will think about you in that setting, and it will truly be about, whatever was available at your school, how did you do within that? Sorry, whenever there's a two-part question, I always forget the second part of the question.
I've already forgotten too.
Right. Well, it was about the diploma program. So
yeah.
Is this, how well is it just overall recognized in admissions processes?
Yes, I would say it is, in my experience, the most well-known of international curricular options.
I would venture a guess that we are probably more familiar with these days, because we read so many international, the IB diploma curriculum, than we are AP curriculum, because I spend more time looking at IB transcripts nowadays than I do, because I don't read as much of domestic applicants anymore. So I would venture things to say that. So we are very familiar with that. We understand the rigor of the IB diploma. And again, I know you mentioned this, but we also understand that there are limitations in terms of how many HLs you can take and SLs you can take. And that is why we never say like, oh, you have to have this at an HL and this at an SL, because again, when you make that decision, you may not necessarily know what you were thinking about applying for or studying when you're kind of putting together that schedule. So, but we do understand the nuances and the rigor that comes with the diploma.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, how do the application costs go with international students? Because I've heard from some US applicants that they can actually be quite a lot. So is there like a way to get a scholarship for that part, or how much does it usually cost anyway?
We make that pretty easy. I'm hoping this is the same, but like it is very easy. So yes, most applications you'll see fees anywhere from like $30, maybe some up as high as $100 or something, although I think most are in that 30 to 50 range in USD. Sorry, I should have said that. But there are always the ability to ask for a fee waiver, and it is a very simple box on the application, and then it will come right through. And if we ever needed to reach out to you or a school to confirm that you needed a fee waiver, we would. But honestly, we usually take students at their word. We do not want the fee for an application to be the barrier for you applying to our institution.
Yes. Same at Brown. Patrick, I am assuming it's the same at Yale as well. Yes, fee waivers readily available.
That's great. I've heard something that it can be like 100 per application, and if you're applying for a lot of schools, then obviously
it adds up
quite a lot.
quickly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, one over here. If you apply for regular decision and you get in, can you ask for a gap year, or do you have to wait for the next academic year and apply again?
Yes, you can absolutely request a gap year after being admitted. I don't know Vanderbilt's policy. I'm guessing it's pretty similar. For us, it's the vast majority of them are granted. Basically, the only situation in which we would say no to a gap year request is if the student is planning to enroll at another college or university, and then we'd say, nope, that's where you're going. But if you want to take that gap year to work, to travel, to fulfill, say, a national service, to do service for a religious organization, those are all things we hear about. That's all totally fine, but you cannot say, Chrissy, I'd like to take a gap year because I'm going to spend a year at Vanderbilt. I would say, no, you will just be.
No, we will gladly just take your student and come enroll.
Be going to Vanderbilt.
And we are exactly the same way. Literally, it says we will probably grant everything unless we just say you can't take any sort of college classes or enroll anywhere. But yeah, we have students do all sorts of great things. But yeah, you can absolutely, and it's simple. You just, if you accept that spot, you send us an email. We actually have an email address called deferrals@Vanderbilt, and we will evaluate what you put in there and grant that gap year, and your spot will be waiting for you next year.
Yep.
It's very simple.
Yes.
Actually, probably one of the simplest parts of our process.
We have one additional step, of course, which is that in January of your gap year, you do have to check in with us and let us know that you do intend to come. Just so we can confirm that. But that's the only additional step.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
That's easy.
There was a question again about IB and taking the IELTS or TOEFL tests. So do they still need to submit those even though they've done IB?
Yeah, so we actually have different answers to that question. So if you are in an English speaking curriculum, which you are doing in IB, we do not ask you to send an IELTS, a TOEFL, a Duolingo, or anything like that.
Yep.
But
We do recommend it if English is not the primary language spoken at home or your first language.
Great.
Yes.
Any questions here at the office? Yes, please.
When you're applying, what's the thing that makes you say, oh, this student is definitely gonna come to Brown or Vanderbilt? Like, is there one specific key thing that a student must have to get accepted?
No.
Yeah. No.
No is the quick answer.
Yeah, no is the quick answer. And again, we're in a very fortunate position where we have such a large number of students that are looking at our institutions, and we really get to dive into those stories. But there can be a variety of different things that stick out about a student, right? This student could be like a leader of this organization. We're like, wow, the impact they're having there. We want that student on our campus and continuing to do that outside the classroom. This student over here could be doing some really incredible research, and we're like, oh, they're a great match for this program or what we offer over here. This student could have this essay that we're like, wow, like the perspective or experience that they are sharing here. I'm like, that's a great fit for our community. We want that student in the classroom or in the residence hall. So like students can stick out in so many different ways, which I also think hopefully makes you feel better, right? You don't necessarily have to stand out in everything, right? There could be like this one thing that like, this is your thing, and you convey that in the application. And we're like, oh, that's perfect for our community. At the same time, what could be perfect for Vanderbilt may not be perfect for Brown, which is why when students are applying to a bunch of these highly selective schools, it's very rare that they get into all of them. Like on paper, some of our numbers may look similar, but students there's a different culture, there's a different community feel. And this is why, going back to Carolina's point at the beginning, researching these institutions is really important, because I think you'll start to see like, oh, there's different cultures and personalities, and this matches kind of what I'm looking for. And I usually say, if you've really done really, really good research, you're probably the schools that you start to resonate with, probably when they're reading your application, are going to kind of feel the same way.
Yes, I agree with everything Shane just said. I would just give two pieces of advice. One would be those school-specific supplements that we talked about. That can be a place where students really do help themselves to stand out. And it's because they've done research and because they've spent time really thinking about, this is why I want to go to this school. So, on Brown Supplement, one of our questions is, what would you do with the open curriculum? Why are you interested in the open curriculum? And if a student there says, oh, it's, a great flexibility. Well, we know that. What I want to know is what you would do with that flexibility. And it's very easy for me to tell who is someone who has really thought about that versus someone who is filling that supplement out, 30 minutes before the deadline to apply. So give yourself some time with those supplements. That's a chance for you to really show your fit for that school. And then the other piece of advice I would give is, if a school says something is recommended, try to do that. So schools that have an interview and recommend it, if you're able to participate in that, they find that helpful. For Brown, that video, if you're able to complete that video for us, we're asking for those pieces of information because they are really helpful to us, and that can be something that helps you to stand out in the process. So if you're looking for those ways to give us that information that we need to learn about you, to think about who you would be on our campus, those recommended components are things that you should really take seriously.
Great.
Yeah, there's a few more here. Is there a benefit to submitting the SAT score if your GPA and grades are already excellent?
Oh, that is a very nuanced and tricky question. I typically say, when you're thinking about, again, I work in a test optional environment, at least for the next few years. We are test optional through fall 2027. So I usually say, if you're like, man, my academic record is really, really strong and it speaks for itself, and this test score doesn't necessarily add anything to that application, then I'd say, let your academic record speak for itself. But if you're like, what, this test score only enhances or adds to my academic record, then I can send it. And I would encourage you to look at middle 50% for schools that are test optional. They will give you a range of what their typical student profile looks like, and decide, okay, where is my test score sort of falling within that range? And that can also be a guide for you. You also, if you apply to multiple schools that are test optional, you don't have to send your test score to all of those schools or none of those schools, right? Your test score over at this institution could be one of the top scores they see. And over at this institution, it might be more typical in what they see. So maybe you send it here and you don't here. I hate that this is a game that you have to play if you're looking at test optional schools, but that can be a little bit tricky as you're sort of thinking about. But I really feel like if your academic record speaks for itself, you don't have to send that test score. Chrissy's going to have a different answer to that because they are asking for testing.
Because it's required. Yes, please do still submit it, even if all of your other academic information is excellent.
Patrick, how about you? When you applied to Yale, did you do tests? Were they compulsory or optional?
Yeah, so they had just become optional. I was applying during COVID, so I didn't take the SAT at all. I did have to take the TOEFL, and sort of go from there. But I did the national curriculum, so that meant that I did have to take the TOEFL, but for the SAT I did not have to take that.
Right. Okay, but it was optional. You decided not to take it. Did you say?
Yeah. I thought that my grades were fine on their own.
Right. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Patrick, I'll ask you a question as well. Just looking back on having you filled out the application, is there any application advice or things you wish you had known when you applied that might be helpful for this group?
Totally. That's a great question and something that sort of I think a lot about. But I think the main thing, sort of, especially as I was applying, it's really hard. You already touched on this, but it's really hard for Finnish people to sort of boast about their own accomplishments or sort of actually talk about themselves in any sort of flattering way. So it's just really important to, yes, you should be humble, and yes, you should be, you should have all of these good qualities that many Finnish people do and that we pride ourselves in. But at the same time, you do have to be able to talk about what you've actually done and the kind of person you are, and even the most minute things that you might not sort of think that are worthy of mentioning actually do seem quite appealing to a lot of admissions officers, at least from what I know. So I think just sort of making a plan as to sort of laying out what you've been doing during high school, what you're actually passionate about, and honing in on that is something that I would just recommend for everyone to do.
I had a feeling you might say that. And I think that is the biggest challenge, right? Is the application is sort of set up for you to talk about yourself, but it is not something that is often natural to a lot of students. But we want to hear your stories. We want to know your accomplishments and achievements. So just don't hold back when you're filling out that application.
Yeah,
great advice.
Thank you so much. We have now come to the end of the event. And we want to thank you, the speakers, so much for coming here and talking to our students. And I hope to see many of you applying to our grant programs and to Brown and Vanderbilt if you found them now appealing to you and suitable to your plans. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
Yes,
again.
course,
thank
yeah.
you for coming.
Help yourself with some chocolate or drinks if you want still.